idea. Let's get to it. Brenden Nunes, Sactown Sports Kings insider, joining us on video.
Yeah, that's right. Look at him.
What's going on? Good morning, Brenden.
Morning. I'm trying to up my game. Honestly, it took me long enough. I'm working on it, but we're here. Thanks for having me, fellas. How we doing?
Very, very interesting. You're up. You're ready to go. Good for you. We appreciate that. I'm going to start by asking you a question we went over earlier. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't say win the whole thing and win a championship and all that. That's, we're asking realistically, if you could personally control now until the end of the season for the Sacramento Kings, what would you want to happen? I love hitting Brenden with he's right out of the gate.
I think the biggest thing that does it for me right now is like the younger players continuing to spread their wings, like Keegan Murray being really aggressive. And I think that you've seen that kind of mixed in recently, but I think there has been increased aggression under Doug. Like, I wish that Devin was out there more. Devin is one of those guys that I can find some hope in because they have a lot of team control there, obviously. And it's one of the few internal growth aspects. But outside of that, with some of the younger players, I'd say I guess winning the play-in, really, right? And getting to the postseason and hoping that that isn't an embarrassment when you get there, because there is also a part of me that worries that they're going to play OKC, lose in 4 or 5, but they're going to be up at halftime in 2 of those games, and that they're going to talk about that for the rest of next year, and it's we weren't actually that close. So a little bit of a double-edged sword there, but I feel like the internal growth from some of the younger guys and probably getting out of the play-in.
That's funny. So we have 3 different answers. Dave's like, rip the Band-Aid, just end it. I had
out.
I had a hybrid. I said, get the reward of the play-in, but probably lose a game and then lose one of the 2 and still keep the pick if you could kind of land somewhere in that sweet spot in the top 12. And
I would rather keep the pick. I guess I didn't consider that in my answer because I don't think that they will do that.
I think that's why Dave went to what you said.
I said, look, I don't want this team to have any semblance of confidence. And by team, I mean the higher ups. I don't want any part of them to be like, well, if we just if we massage around the edges and they showed some signs like, right. No, it sucks. But I'd rather them lose every game the rest of the year and us go into the offseason making real tough decisions that sometimes you have to do in order to come out on the other end, like dude in Shawshank,
100%. Yeah, like I said, I can already hear we were up at halftime in 2 of the games to the eventual championship Thunder. And it's like, but you won none of the games. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
So, yes, I do have similar.
Okay, so just to be clear, then you want what I want.
If it was fully, taking because I took the realism as they will not try to lose game. I would want to keep the pick. I don't think winning games matters at all anymore, to be honest. And that's just broader. I get the players are not going to feel that way, obviously. But no, I think that you should keep your pick. I'm not one of the you'll have more assets if you just give it to Atlanta now. Sure, slightly, but you also, if you get your pick this year, that becomes tradable at the day of the draft as well. So I don't think there's a huge difference in assets either way. And I'd rather have that pick now, personally. And there's still a world, by the way, I feel like it doesn't get talked about, that could just never be a first-round pick to Atlanta.
Yeah,
unfortunately, the Kings could also be top 10 next year, and then it's just 2 seconds.
Yep. Yeah, it's very possible. They've already dodged a couple of years here. So, Brenden, we are also talking this question. So, however this season ends, whether it's any of the things that we all just discussed, whether they miss, whether they make a plan, whatever it goes, the offseason, obviously, there'll be some big decisions. We said that Sam yesterday talked about Sabonis and DeRozan. We'll have some real conversations with that front office. As you kind of look at the way the team is constructed, what do you think should be their first things they approach and attack in this offseason?
Well, I think you got to first figure out who's making the decisions. I think the fact that we're hearing a lot of GM candidate names says a lot about probably the job security of Bonnie McNair. And I'm sure that will be assessed. And my guess is that they'll decide to go in a different direction. Obviously, you saw Wes Wilcox decide to take that University of Utah job. I think there was I think as Sam had mentioned on your guys' show, there was some talk of potentially Wes moving into that spot. Now, obviously, with that change, you just got to see who's making the decision first. Do they get to pick their own head coach is another part of this. But outside of that, I would say that, I mean, I think one of DeMar, if not both, one of DeMar or Domas has probably moved on from this offseason. I'm very much thinking that they're going to triple down here. I don't think there's any sort of resetting, retooling like I personally would do. I do think you also kind of missed that timeline when you elected to not do that while you were trading De'Aaron Fox. But I think that they're going to try to rework the top of the roster. I think that we're going to hear the Kings continue to be linked with like a Kevin Durant, and throw in first round picks along with DeMar DeRozan or like a Trae Young or John Morant. I think that they are going to try and salvage this with reworking the top of their roster and one of those guys. And again, if it were me, I probably would be a fan of tearing it down and resetting, even though I understand why the fan base may not be the biggest fan of that. But I think that I'm expecting them to try to rework the top of this roster. And there's a world where you hit a home run, but I also think that you put yourself in a corner where you don't get to be patient and like make sure that we get the right guy. You kind of have to do it this offseason.
I continue. You mentioned we have not, I don't think, once brought this up on the show, partly because I'm worried about it, but I continually hear whispers that keep your eye on Trae Young in the offseason. Keep your eye on Trae Young, and the Kings get whispered into those whispers. Now, first glance at Trae Young, he signed for the next 2 years after this season wraps up at $46 million. And then he has a player option at $49 million. Strangely enough, that almost exactly, very closely lines up with the 47 and 49 that Zach LaVine is owed. I cannot imagine a world in which the Atlanta Hawks would trade Trae Young for Zach LaVine, but I also don't think LaVine and DeRozan, one of those two at the least, will be gone this year, this coming next year. That makes me think, buddy, that we might need to start flinching at the idea of a LaVine and something for Trae Young in the offseason and them getting a true point guard.
It's interesting. I typically tend to think that LaVine is like I definitely think he could be on the table. I'm curious what the league-wide value would be. Obviously, he's been on the market for a while, and the Kings are the one that kind of swooped in. And at the moment where his value was probably at his best, he'd been playing great this year, recovering from, I think he was dealing with a handful of injuries last year and obviously years prior. I think that you try to do it with Domas and or DeMar first, but to your point, like, why does Atlanta want to do this? Honestly, any of those deals. And that's the complicated aspect from Sacramento's point of view is most teams are not trying to trade win now players for win now players. It's typically, I'm trading my good guy now for let's just get younger here. And you're looking for that rare scenario, which is why I think the KD thing will have a lot of juice to it because Phoenix is another team that is in that similar scenario. I don't know that DeMar DeRozan is necessarily valuable to that team, but it's this Minnesota pick, I think, that is going to be really the main prize that at least the Kings can dangle around in these conversations. And, hey, maybe we reach Keegan Murray like Monty McNair. He's the Keegan Murray guy, right? That's his baby, essentially, his first pick. If it's a different front office, who's to say how they're going to feel about Keegan? And he has a decent amount of value around the league. So, yeah, definitely see your logic. I tend to think that Domas and DeMar are the ones that you would look to move first. But yeah, I think the Trae Young thing is definitely something that I've heard. I would say KD and Trae Young are probably the two I've heard the most, with John Morant after that.
By the way, Trae Young for Domantas Sabonis works straight up, just out of curiosity. John Hollinger's analysis. I think this is wrong. The Atlanta Hawks would lose 16 wins in that trade.
Really?
Wow. I think we found it.
A loophole?
That can't be
That
right.
doesn't seem right.
Can I ask you guys a hypothetical that got pitched to me? This is actually a couple of years ago, but I think it's way more relevant now. Chris Peterman has been saying for a while. What do we think about Domas for Zion? How crazy is that?
Son of a.
Just a general idea. I'm not saying that I'm hearing this is happening.
I do it.
But I think it's interesting because it's a, lower floor, higher ceiling conversation.
100% higher ceiling.
So Zion Williamson's he makes 40, 42, and 45. That is not the issue. Is just Captain Obvious. I would do that in a heartbeat if you told me Zion Williamson had averaged 65 games over the next few years. I would do it in a heartbeat. Zion Williamson's ceiling is insane. And when he's on the floor, he's literally a top 10 player in the NBA when he's on the floor. Again, I'm going to go back to Rene Russo and Tin Cup. At this point, I say screw it. You know what? I know what we have in Domas. I love Domas. Whatever. At least that'll be kind of exciting next year. And then then we roll out Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Zion Williamson, and Jonas Valanciunas, and just whatever. It'd be like watching a car crash. Let's just have fun.
I agree. I think it's an interesting conversation because, again, it's the ceiling conversation. They could not be more opposite players, right? And maybe New Orleans is tired of the unavailability and they want something consistent. And Domas really epitomizes that, obviously. And Kings in a different scenario. So just something that I thought was interesting when it was first presented.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Brenden, when you said this, you would work on DeRozan or Sabonis first over LaVine. Is that because of contract? Because of you think LaVine could be a guy you build around? Just kind of curious about why you would do that first.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's already questions that exist of how DeMar and Domas may feel about this team. And I think that there's part of me that thinks there's a decent chance that those guys may not want to be here this offseason. Definitely factors into that. And I don't know exactly where Zach's head may be at. Obviously, this year has not gone exactly how he would have thought. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of that and what I imagine league-wide value would be. I think that Zach's contract is still a big question mark. And there's still you haven't really done it on a winning team, and so I think it's still a lot of questions there. And also that's the guy that I would probably want to, at this point, just keep him around. Like, I think there is a lot there. And the politics of this is the guy that you just traded your franchise point guard for. I just, in my mind, it's hard to see a world where Zach LaVine has moved on from. I think that it definitely will be explored and it's not without or out of the realm of possibility. I just think it's unlikely because of that contract, the politics of he's the guy that you just traded your franchise guy for. And also he's really good when he is on. You just got to get the right complementary pieces around him. And I think that we've seen them try to build around Domas. You obviously could have done it a little bit better. DeMar's at the timeline where I don't think that's the one you're building around. So personally, I would probably pick Zach there.
You got me with this stupid trade machine open, Brenden. Thank you. and I don't like talking about trading Domantas Sabonis because I love him so much. Let me throw one more out at you just for fun, since you got me on New Orleans. The Sacramento Kings trade Domantas Sabonis. The New Orleans Pelicans trade DeJounte Murray and Herb Jones. Who says no?
Not Keon. Didn't Keon go to college with Herb Jones? I think he's a big fan of Herb Jones.
Yeah. No, but which team says no?
Right. We said DeJounte and Herb Jones for Domas. I mean, probably New Orleans.
Yeah,
I guess
maybe.
DeJounte's value is weird, though.
It is.
I don't know how to feel about DeJounte Murray, to be honest. But the Kings need a point guard. Obviously, it's funny how we reached that scenario. Obviously, of talking about how, oh my God, they have nothing but guards. And then next thing you know, it's where's the point guard on this
and team? You had 2 top 10 point guards in the league 10 minutes ago.
Right. And to be fair, I don't think that DeJounte is necessarily like he's a little bit more of a combo guard in my mind, rather than just like the straight. They need an orchestrator out there, right? The Lonzo equivalent, with him obviously being a dramatic example. But I think it's New Orleans that says no. But the Kings have a lot of picks. Like I will say, in that Fox trade, they did manage to get a lot of picks, and their own firsts probably have a lot of value. When the Lauri Markkanen trade conversations were going on and they were like competing with Golden State specifically was one of them. A lot of the talk at that time was, well, the Golden State picks are more valuable. Like those are viewed as who knows what's going to happen with Golden State. I think that has probably shifted based on how this year has gone. I would imagine those Kings future firsts are even more valuable now.
That's Kings Insider. Brenden Nunes joins us each and every Friday to wrap up the week. Brenden, appreciate you, brother. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Take care. That is Brenden Nunes. And we'll take a break. When we come back, the Final Four